Thank you for coming, everybody. Good afternoon. I would love to start with a land acknowledgement. And Carleton University sits on the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. As we come together to reflect on wellness, share perspectives, and strengthen connections within our communities, in our campus, we also have an opportunity to reflect on our relationship with the land we occupy, our history, and the ongoing work of advancing reconciliation at Carleton and beyond. And I should add that I am brand new to Carleton, and I'm learning about both the land, our connections, and our community. I joined 4 weeks ago as the AVP of HR and Chief People Officer, and I've already felt the strong sense of community that lives here. I can feel it in the interactions, I can feel it in the meetings that we have. And so I can sense it and feel it, and I'm delighted that this is happening. I'm also stepping in the role of Healthy Workplace Co-Chair with Adrian. And in preparing for this role and for today, I've been learning a little bit about the history of Healthy Workplace at Carleton. And it started 16 years ago. And recently, there is a new updated Healthy Workplace strategy, which is the next step in the journey and our commitments to wellness at Carleton. And really, Healthy Workplace is about helping Carleton become, remain, and adapt to being a place where health and well-being are woven into every part of our work and our community so that everyone has an opportunity to flourish. And you'll see resources on the back that we later on today. If you haven't had a chance to read the updated strategy, I encourage you to do so. It is short, practical, and focused what matters most. It's focused on building social connections, fostering safe, respectful, and inclusive environments, and embracing a holistic culture of well-being. And I really want to thank the working group that's put this together and the thoughtfulness and inclusive consultations that were part of the strategy development. So thank you, team, for doing that. Today's panel is an opportunity to explore what the workplace health and well-being looks like in practice. We draw on diverse perspectives and lived experiences from across our community. Following the panel, and you'll see this in the back, we have a wellness showcase that will highlight the many resources, supports, and initiatives available to both faculty and staff. I encourage you to take the time to ask questions, explore, and make some meaningful connections that I already started doing. As we begin, I would invite all of you to reflect on what a healthy workplace means to you, how you consider your own wellness, the wellness of those around you, and the ways we can work together to strengthen well-being across Carleton. Healthy Workplace is about all of us, it's for all of us, and it's curated and influenced by all of us. So we all have a role to play in that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Todd, who will be moderating our panel discussion on wellness in the current moment. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. We thought we'd begin our discussion by introducing ourselves, how we came to the topic of workplace wellness, the trends we're sort of seeing right now, and what wellness means to us. I thought as the moderator I'd get out of that, but apparently not. So I get to start, which I am happy to do. I teach in the School of Social Work. Right now I'm also director of Kroeger College, but social work is kind of my home. So I'm not really sure of the trends in workplace wellness, but in social work, I think what's capturing people right now is a lot of Christian Neff's work. So she has this video about self-compassion breaks and taking self-compassion breaks during your day. And I know that's something we're spending a lot of time with. And thinking about workplace wellness, not so much about taking care of ourselves, but also how we create our own wellness by taking care of each other. So I think that's a really big part of the conversations in my discipline right now. In terms of my definition of wellness, I often use the Whole Being Institute's notion of SPIRE. And so if you don't know this, it's the notion that people who thrive cultivate spirituality, they take care of their physical bodies, They are intentional about intellectual stimulation and remain open to new experiences. They nurture constructive relationships with themselves and others. And finally, they're not afraid of their emotions. They don't deny or suppress them, but they are mindful of them. So that's how I land here. And now I'll turn it over to Adrian to introduce himself.
Should have sat at the end. Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian Chan. I'm a professor in the Department of Systems and Computer Engineering. I've been at Carleton now for 23 years, I think. And I am one of the co-chairs of Healthy Workplace. In terms of wellness and well-being, I was trying to figure how I define it myself. I think like when I think of well-being, I think of that as more of like a state, like how you are doing right now. When I think of wellness, I think about it as a pursuit, right? We're pursuing well-being, I guess. And for myself, I feel I can think that linked to that idea of pursuit. I don't know, there are days, of course, where I feel like I'm okay, but most of the times I think I'm more or less pursuing, I guess, the state of well-being. And sometimes I'm hitting it and sometimes I'm not, but it kind of fluctuates, right? And I think that's fine, and I think that's how often we live our days, right? Trying to balance a whole bunch of things together. In terms of where I think we are right now, I feel that when I look at the world and talk to other people, that we're still in a state of flux, where we look back in terms of what has happened, and particular markers in the world, the pandemic being one of them, right? It was really disruptive. Despite that disruption, right, we're still trying to figure out where we're settling, right? We still things in terms of how we work from home, work on campus, that hybrid kind of things. Everyone's just still trying to figure out how the world functions, I find. And we're still trying to figure that out. And I think people still feel in a lot of flux. Simultaneously, there's a lot of things going on in the world that's causing other disruptions, I guess. That's causing us, I think, a lot of people to feel unsettled still. And so I think that that's kind of where we're remaining. The difference is, compared to previous years, is that we've been in this flux for a while now, and it's becoming tiresome, I think. So.
Thank you. Danielle.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am going to read out of notes, which is very unlike me if you have met me, but it's because when I'm passionate about things, I'm very long-winded, and I am quite sure that my other colleagues have a lot more important things to say than I do. So I wrote things down to not be as long-winded as I usually am. One of the questions I asked is, sitting on the panel, what hat should I be wearing? Because I wear a lot of weird and different hats. So one of the things I did was wrote down my hats. First of all, I'm a white fourth-generation settler on the unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Anishinaabe. This land has afforded me the privilege to describe the other roles that I'm about to read in this list, which I am committed to conciliation and acknowledgement of that privilege. I am also a registered nurse by trade. My research focuses on coding and AI, and so I'll leave that for later if you want to talk about those intersections. I've held formal positions of mid to high level leadership for the last 10 years in acute care hospitals and academic institutions, and have explored a lot of educational leadership training and theory with an emphasis on workforce culture, which forms some of the basis of my dissertation of my doctorate in education. I worked as an RN during the pandemic, and I've been keenly interested in workforce planning related to healthcare provider shortages ever since. I'm currently the director of the School of Nursing here at Carleton, which officially welcomed our first students in September. So we're a brand new program, yay! So exciting. And everyone in this room has supported that in some way, I'm sure, so thank you. I'm also a mother of 2 children who, despite working as an academic, are actually my greatest teachers in life. And I'm a yogi, so that is like a weird, all the hats I wear and how I'll answer this question. And then I proposed the topic of defining wellness because I'm exploring and unlearning a lot of my Western-centric models, learning a lot from Lane and her team about Indigenous models. And so I wanted to start by defining, in many of the contexts in which I live and work, the common definition of wellness is often informed by a Western Eurocentric model. And it's a thought that it's a state of being in good health, especially as an actively pursued goal. So kind of to your point, a state. Recently in one of my classes, I had the opportunity to ask students to define health or healthy. Traditionally, the Western model or biomedical model describes health as the absence of disease, illness, or injury. In our society of chronic illness, where likely many folks in this room have a diagnosis of some type, my challenge then to the students was to articulate if this meant they believed someone with any type of a diagnosis could not be healthy. And if you've lived experience with a diagnosis, this isn't a surprise, but of course students recognize that of course people with diagnoses could be considered healthy people, and that healthy truly is an individual state of mind. It's also formed by a lot of sociocultural norms. I've been trained in a Western medical model that prioritizes imperial and colonial knowledge formed on assumptions of privilege, which is just a fancy way of saying that some very privileged folks decided at some point what normal was and how we ought to look if we're well. A lot of my journey in the last 5 years has been unlearning my Western bias, and in doing so, expanding my understanding of how other models define wellness. For example, defining wellness in relationship to the lands and the environment, which is traditionally not included in our Western egocentric view of self as wellness. I think this brings to me the connection of today and Carleton's Healthy Workforce Strategic Plan, which not only focuses on the individual, but more importantly focuses on nurturing connections within our entire community. Thank you.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Workman. I am a National Practice Leader, Organizational Health at Canada Life, and I was here last year and I was saying how Adrian, it was a bit of a snowstorm last year. For those of you, I recognize the faces, so I'm happy that there's no snowstorm this year and we can have a bit more individuals joining us. I've been at Canada Life nearly 26 years, and I've been in this role for about 17 years. And I work on a team of 9 individuals across the country that support our large benefits clients, so clients that have health benefits and disability benefits with us, and I provide strategic support for wellness and disability management. So wellness is really ingrained in everything I do for the clients that I support, including Carleton, who I've worked with for over 20 years. And for me, what I've seen firsthand is organizations that embed wellness into their culture are organizations that see an improvement with everything from employee engagement, employee satisfaction, a willingness to participate in events like this that are engaged, people that are engaged in events outside of the scope of their regular job duties. I see, firsthand changes with things like utilization of medication or utilization of, from a benefit standpoint, or even disability or leave absences. Organizations that embed and that live a healthy environment and live the premise behind having a healthy workplace are organizations that really help to support individuals when they're well and how to stay well, but also help support individuals when they're unwell. So whether they're struggling within the workplace, it's impacting performance, or whether it's starting to impact attendance, that's what a healthy workplace is supporting a well-to-well philosophy. And when I think about wellness, when I started, again, supporting organizations like Carleton before the Healthy Workplace was developed, and 16 years ago, as you mentioned, it was very cookie cutter. Like, there were very much organizations just plug and play, one type of wellness program, and everybody has to participate in that. That's the only option you had. You had one option, whether it was a walking program or whether it was some sort of nutrition program or even a mental health program. It was really a one-size-fits-all, and what we have come to learn is that wellness is deeply personal and deeply individual, and I think that Ellen kind of spoke to that. And I think something that Carleton and I have seen over the years has evolved the Healthy Workplace program is to ensure that you offer a program that allows individuals to participate in events or participate in initiatives that meets your values, that meets your initiatives, your interests. And I think that is at the basis of all wellness, is ensuring that it's a program that's holistic, that really speaks to the pillars of health. So whether it's mental well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being, social well-being, which I think I'm going to be speaking a lot about today, those are sort of the foundational pillars of wellness, but it allows each and every one of you to choose an initiative or a wellness approach that best meets your needs. And for me, that's wellness. It's about really allowing the opportunity to take your own approach to what helps support your well-being.
Wow. They're super interesting. Okay, now we're gonna have fun. Okay, so for the next question, so that Adrian doesn't get on the hot seat first every time, Danielle, I'll get you to go first, then Caroline, then Adrian. So what we're hoping you could tell us a bit about is what are some aspects or dimensions of well-being that are overlooked or taken for granted?
And I promise I'll stop reading after this question. I can actually think on the spot after this question.
You'll be doing better than me. I'm looking at the notes.
Thank you. So this is an interesting question. I took a lot of time to think about how I could frame a response. And I'd like to do this as any good academic through the use of a theory. So one of the models many folks are introduced to in the social sciences is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so I can see people nodding. You've heard that before. This is also a good indicator in class that people are following along, not on their phones. What is lesser known, though, about this model is actually founded by Blackfoot knowledge. So when Maslow spent 6 weeks living at Siksika, which was a Blackfoot reserve, a lot of the knowledge was actually founded from Indigenous knowledge keepers. Like the above explanation of how I think about broad sociocultural wellness, one of the published differences in Maslow's model and the Blackfoot way of life is the idea that Maslow's model has been understood to refer to an individual. So again, that egocentric model that we tend to do in our Western practice, whereas the Blackfoot way of life looks collectively at the community. So I think that is a really important thing to acknowledge. For those who don't know the model, this is a bit of a recap, so please bear with me. If you don't know it, you can visualize a pyramid that's divided into 5 sections. They're horizontal from the base to the apex. On the bottom layer is physiological needs. These are required by all humans to establish as a priority. These things include things like food, shelter, heat, and therefore income. Once the physiological needs are met, the next layer is safety. This includes physical and psychological aspects of safety. The 2 bottom layers are described as your basic needs as a human. The 3rd layer is belongingness and love. This includes relationships. Above this is esteem, which includes a feeling of accomplishment and purpose. These 2 levels are considered your psychological needs. At the apex is your self-actualization. This is the ability to achieve your full potential and is considered a self-fulfillment need. The idea of this model is that you have to achieve each layer below to be able to advance to the next layer above. Now, my reason for introducing this model is that it allows me to acknowledge through theory that it is incredibly challenging, if not impossible, to address psychological needs like belongingness when basic needs like food and shelter cannot be met. In this time of international, federal, provincial, and even institutional financial uncertainty, it's not lost on me that I'm sitting on a panel where I recognize my privilege that we can idealize how to be well, but we must first, as a community, ensure basic needs are met to enable this to actually happen. And in these times, each of us is sitting with very real, very unique positions with needs and responsibilities that are impacted by all of these influences every day. I promise I'll stop reading after this.
Thank you, that's great, I appreciate it. Caroline?
So I thought I'd just maybe lead off with a bit about what we're seeing, and I think what I bring to the panel is about what are we seeing within Canadian workplaces, what are we seeing within public sector workplaces, what are we seeing? I support Carleton, I support University of Ottawa, I support Northern Ontario School of Medicine, so I have an understanding of the post-secondary culture and the post-secondary makeup on how that can have an influence on wellness. And what we're seeing across the board that has not changed and should not change, it should be the support of mental well-being in the workplace. And I think something that Carleton has embraced very early on is the concept of creating a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. And I think that is critical in order to ensure that you have people that feel safe, that you have people that feel heard, that you have people that feel respected within the workplace. And so some of the things that I think I'm going to lean on will align within that concept, that there is an importance that every workplace needs to be psychologically safe for all individuals that work here. But how do you do that? And I think the trends that we're seeing on how do we get to psychological health and healthy and safe workplaces, some of them are going to be fundamental. Training are going to be things, to reinforce things like normalizing conversations about wellness, about mental health. Those should be table stakes. Like those should be things that we should all expect our employers to offer in a psychologically safe workplace. But sometimes organizations need help, and where we're seeing a push towards is, and I think, Danielle, you spoke about AI, we're really seeing a push towards leveraging AI in the space of wellness. Now, using, personal devices is like kind of the more traditional way to use AI, where you're looking at, understanding data from somebody, how many steps have they taken, or what are they eating, or things like that. But we're also seeing AI play a role in mental health, where we're seeing AI provide things like nudges, provide support chatbots, support for counseling, giving access to care where we know within our medical community we're often challenged to find access to support. So we're seeing AI really playing a role within wellness, and as well in particular within mental health support. We're also seeing, though, a real transition with how we take or how we look at technology and this concept of digital detoxing. So I think, Adrian, you spoke about kind of what are the changes that we're seeing over the last number of years, coming through the pandemic, some of the political issues that we're seeing within the media, not only just political, but even wellness. Like, we're seeing individuals that are, taking medication for Ozempic, or they're taking Wegovy, or they're TikToks of people that have lost drastic weight loss. And those are all things that can have a severe impact on our own well-being and create stress. So the concept of building wellness that aligns with digital detoxing or going analog is the approach that we're seeing a lot of organizations start to pivot towards. So yes, you're thinking about AI to access support and access information to be able to provide support to employees, but we're also looking at how do you unplug. And I think Carleton does a really good job of creating programming under the Healthy Workplace that really supports community, that gets people back together again face to face, that puts your phone down, that allows you to engage in healthy activities, that really aligns with, again, that foundation of how do we get away from using technology all the time. So if we think about what are the things that are overlooked, part of that it aligns with this issue of technology. And loneliness is a huge part of it. Like, technology fuels loneliness. I think during the pandemic, we were all in that same sort of space, but it really hasn't changed. I think we haven't gone back to where we were pre-pandemic. And I think this idea of loneliness can be addressed with trying to look at the concept of unplugging, the concept of social connection, which I know we're going to talk about in a moment. But it's also about looking at self-care. And I think that's the other thing that really gets overlooked. Self-care is a real common term in the wellness space, and it's not selfish to have self-care. And self-care, on the superficial level, could be things like the bubble bath or a face mask or things like that, which are all lovely, and I love them too. But self-care really is about understanding what your needs are, understanding, like taking a more introspective look about work-life balance. It's understanding how do you prioritize your needs. So it's really about ensuring that we look at our own self-care, and again, going back to everybody's is going to be individual, so ensuring that we develop a plan to address our own personal needs with regards to our own well-being, and prioritizing it during our day is a real area that I think is not tapped into, that we really need to reinforce, especially when it comes to work-life balance, budget cuts, the hours of the day are shrinking when we have other obligations when we leave the workplace. So again, I think those are the two areas that I think are sort of playing a big role and are being overlooked. And the other one I think aligns with, again, social connections, is spiritual wellness. I think this is an area of opportunity where we have to look beyond what we do every day. We have to look and see what are the things that make us happy, and how can we cultivate that happiness. And for some people, it's religion. And for some people, my husband always says, he's a rugby player, he says, my religion is my rugby club. And it's that feeling of belonging. And sometimes being part of a group is part of your religion. So spirituality is really individual, and it can be nurtured with everything from journaling, meditation. It can be nurtured by having conversations with other people with like situations. So I think that spiritual wellness is the other area that's overlooked. That is something that we want to ensure that is part of a wellness program.
Thank you. Adrian.
Yeah, just to build up maybe on a few things that have been said. We think about wellness, there are multiple dimensions, right? We have like physical wellness, we have social wellness, mental wellness, financial, professional, etc. I guess what I want to raise is that sometimes we overlook the interconnectedness of it all. And that when I participate in physical activity, it has an impact on my mental wellness, right? And I really, want to echo the importance of social wellness, that need to connect socially with individuals. I was listening to a podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts while I clean, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. And this was talking about this Harvard study, the happiness study, and they were looking at how social connections had a huge impact on people's physical wellness, right? And we don't think about that just seeing people and conversing with people, that it has an impact physically in terms of how we are as well. And just to ground it, I guess, in terms of my own personal life, this year has been, and it's just begun, it's only January, but it's been a tough year. Like I mentioned last year that I'm part of a sandwich generation thing. I've got 4 young kids. My parents are even older this year compared to last year. I'm getting older too. So last year I hit 50, which was, my whole body's kind of falling apart, I feel like, once I hit that level. But there's a lot of chaos happening in my life, like just in this first part of January. And I know for myself, and I think it's true for a lot of people, that when we're under a lot of stress, our instinct is sometimes to retreat, right? Is just be like, I got to take care of like what I need to take care of, and you head down, and you start losing connections with people, right? Because you're making choices of trying to get the things that you need to get done, okay? And what I want to point out, not just for yourself, but also your impact on others, that sometimes small actions have a big impact, right? And so what sustains me through this time is every once in a while I'll have a friend that just, gives me a little text and say, hey, I know things are tough. How are things going? Just checking up on you, right? Sometimes I'll respond, sometimes I'll respond days later. But just to know that someone's thinking of you, right, has a big impact, okay? And so these social connections aren't necessarily these big things where, you're going out and spending like a whole evening together and things like that. These social connections can be small, but meaningful and impactful, I guess. I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is that Carleton has always been a community-oriented institution, right? And I think that type of recognition that we need to look after each other and check in on each other, I think has really done well in terms of getting us through difficult times. And I just hope that we continue to recognize that and the importance of it.
Thank you. So that actually leads us nicely into the next question. So you've all spoken about hard times in different ways, whether they're sort of personal, institutional, or they're sort of larger political. And Caroline, I was wondering if you could start with the third question we have, which is, can you give us any ideas about how to stay healthy and motivated during difficult times, and what we might want to prioritize in terms of workplace well-being?
Yeah, I think it's the glass half empty, glass half full sort of analogy, and I think something that Adrian, you mentioned, that is critical when you're struggling and you know that wellness is important and you still need to make it a priority, is making sure that you set realistic goals and you try to achieve small steps towards wellness. It doesn't have to be, again, going back to that TikTok, you don't have to look at an individual on TikTok and be like, I wish I would look like her. I wish I was 20 pounds lighter. I wish I had more muscle mass. Like, you really need to look at your own well-being and make sure that you set reasonable goals in order to try to achieve your well-being while you're going through maybe some difficult times. And those difficult times might be, being on campus, you're very contingent to your calendar, to the academic calendar. It might be the time of year. It might be your family obligations, whether you've got kids or whether you've got, like Adrian has, elder parents to make time. But it's making small goals that are achievable that is really critical to help support your wellness when you are struggling. And I think, going back to social connections, which I think is going to be the theme today, is about building a network. So your network is whether it's the people that are in the workplace with you, whether it's friends, whether it's family, whatever your community is. To me, it's when you're in tough times, you need to lean on that network, and that network can help you, motivate you. Like when you're not feeling great and you want to get out for a walk at lunch hour, that network is going to be the one that's going to help support you, to kind of nudge you. Let's go for a walk. Let's put the phone down. Let's not look at emails. Let's go take a walk around campus. So really leaning on your network is something that I'd recommend.
Thank you. Adrian, do you have some things to add?
Yeah. As you're speaking, Carol, just a lot of things going through my mind in terms of like how we respond to things, right? And it kind of goes both ways, right? That leaning on to others is important, and it's difficult to do. I remember a friend of mine called me a few weeks ago. He was having a really tough time, and called and just reached out because they wanted to talk and try to see if I could just be an ear to listen, right? Not going to solve all of her problems, but it's nice to be able to talk, right? And towards the end of the conversation, she's like, "I'm sorry for bothering you. I know you're busy," and things like that. And I responded, I was like, no. Like, I was actually grateful that she thought that she could reach out to me in a time and I could be there for her, right? And I was like, I really appreciate that. And I think we need to think ourselves in that way as well. Like when we're reaching out to other people, right, we're saying a lot about that other person, that we really appreciate them. And we need to have that, we need to give ourselves the same grace that we give others, I guess, right? And so when we're reaching out to people, sometimes we feel like I'm going to be a burden. But in the same way I felt appreciative, I'm sure you would feel appreciative if someone reached out to you. And I'm sure your friends would also feel appreciated if you reached out to them.
Thanks. Danielle?
I will not top those answers. And I joked with my unit. I said, nobody's here, so I can say that we have the best unit. No one can call me out on our practices. I don't know. As a registered nurse who's worked in a lot of trauma, I can tell you what not to do probably more easily than I can tell you what to do. You've addressed like self-isolation. You've addressed the notion that we feel like we're burdening folks when actually it does really like give people that sense of community and engagement and trust and a lot of other really important things when you reach out and you trust them. I would say like defining healthy boundaries is something that we're probably not good at, and because it feels uncomfortable, but it's pretty imperative. And I think that it took me a long time to understand what my burnout symptoms were. So now my burnout symptoms are forgetfulness. I have an insane memory. I can remember a lot. And if I start to become forgetful, I didn't realize why before, but now I know that's a hard stop in my burnout. It usually means I'm way past burnout, in fact, and so I kind of work backwards now, where I'll take my full year calendar and kind of build in some supports for myself when I know things are tough. And so, for me as a teacher, I have an exam period, and in that time, I know I have to be really on, and so it would be tough for me if I was sick during that time. So I try to proactively build out a couple weeks before things I can do from a physical health and wellness perspective. From the time after, I try not to book any major meetings. Taking the approach of looking at your whole year in advance might seem really daunting, but it's a lot easier than you think because there's usually patterns to everyone's year. And then the only thing that I'll add that our team does, and I promise you can vet this with them, I'm not just making it up, but then we look at it together as a team because, again, the concept of working not in isolation is really valuable. So when we look at it as a team, it's not just me identifying periods that might be extra stressful for me, but a colleague might say, oh, I have nothing going on, like, can I cover you during those periods? And then to your point, like the accountability. Mm-hmm. So physical goals are usually easy from an accountability perspective because either you do or don't do them, and they're pretty easy to see if somebody does or doesn't do them. So having the community to help you there. Mental goals are harder. And that's the boundaries thing. Yeah. So if your mental goal is to identify when you're burnt out and take a day off, having a colleague set up good boundaries for you to say, put your out of office on, do not answer your emails. Mm-hmm. I will cover you. Don't answer your emails is a really hard thing for us to hear and then adhere to. And so I am going to work really hard in our unit to make sure that that's a norm for us because we just have this crazy way of life in North America where instant access and 24-hour response and 7-day-a-week work life is normal, but it is not normal in the whole world, and it is not sustainable. And to your point, Adrian, we have been sustaining this unsustainable approach for a really long time now. So I think just setting up clear communication about expectations is really impactful in units. And if there's pushback, having crucial conversation about, one of my colleagues brought to me, her personal feeling was she needed to respond. And I asked, why do you feel like that? I don't need you to respond. And she said, I just feel like I do. And so kind of just having the dialogue. I'm not saying proposing solutions, just having the dialogue. Why do you feel like that? And then hopefully with a culture change, you can get into a place where there's healthy boundaries.
And I think, and you bring up a good point, because I think that comes from how important leaders are, managers and supervisors, deans, whoever you are so important to instill that and say and to validate that it's okay to take that approach, because most individuals wouldn't do it if their leader didn't feel that it was appropriate. So leaders, for me, are such a critical role within an organization to be able to provide that sort of guidance and affirmation.
Yeah, and I think I advocate, I recognize there's a lot of different leaders and a lot of different leadership styles. The sustainability of your people, I think, is the most important thing as a leader. And so if you're feeling like you're not aligning with your leader's direction, having a crucial conversation about resilience and sustainability, based on building in some of those things, I think is a very complicated conversation, but a really important conversation.
I got to just add one thing, which is it goes back to this wellness being very personal. So when I hear about we got to make sure that we stay away from my emails and only during the work days, I can't live like that. Right? That actually is not the way I work, right? I work I work really effective when I'm motivated, and I can't schedule my motivation. And so there are some times during the day I'm here on campus and I am just not doing well at all, and so I'm just not working very well, right? And at night, when I'm like, oh, I'm really gung-ho, or sometimes on the weekend, I don't mind working, right? But I think there still needs to be boundaries, right? We still need to be able to make sure that we have this harmony between work and life. And that's sometimes different between people. And I think the issue arises when we have different expectations of each other, or misguided expectations, right? So just because I operate that way, would be problematic if I expect everyone else to operate that way, right? I know sometimes I'll send an email at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'm up for some reason, right? And no one else should be expected to do things like that, right? If they're like me and they do so, and sometimes we're exchanging emails 3 o'clock in the morning, it's fine if everyone's on board with that. But it's when our expectations of others or our assumed expectations of others are there, that causes conflict and stress and other problems as well.
And that's why it's so individual.
Yeah.
Like wellness for you and how it fits your routine is going to be different from Danielle or from me.
Mm-hmm.
These guys don't need a moderator. So you've all in different ways mentioned the value of strong relationships at work. And I guess I was wondering if you could speak a bit about how to build those. I mean, one of the things that I took most out of the Carleton leader was remembering not to phone and talk to people rather than sending emails. That the difference that made in the relationships I had at work was huge. So I was wondering if you had other strategies or ways to build those, and how do we make space for this? Usually we're so task-oriented in a day. I don't know about other people, but I come in with this to-do list. It's a big day if I get through a couple items. How do we sort of make space for these things? And I don't know, Adrian, could you maybe
Sure.
start us there?
I think one of the things that at least I find challenging, I think a number of people find challenging, is that we can't do that all the time with everyone, I guess, right? And I think that's where people feel the struggle. I think we do need tight connections, but they don't have to be with everyone else. We think of it, this is the problem I think with some of social media, which is we have a lot of weak connections, right? And so there's a lot of people that I'm connected with online, but that's what they are. They're just weak connections. So
I'm going to tell them you said that.
Yeah. But they probably feel the same way, right? We'll message each other here and there and stuff like that. But and it's odd because one of my best friends, I barely message. Like, I barely message at all. But I know if I had a problem and needed something, he would fly over and be there the next day, right? And so our connections aren't always necessarily like the ones that we interact a lot. It's one that's built up over time, and there's that level of trust, I guess. And so I think we need to assess where those strong connections are and where we're investing those, right? The last thing I would say is how we choose those times as well. There's a saying about, like, when we think of our best friends, we find when we have like a spare time or nothing else to do. But why would we only choose to be with our friends when we have nothing else to do, right? It's kind of like that choice about going out to do something physical or whatever, right? It is the same kind of thing. It is a choice that we make, and it's something that we should choose with excitement, I guess.
Danielle?
This isn't a solution, it's a story, I guess. So open to interpretation. And it's really personal. So I had a really good conversation with somebody in TLS about working from home versus working in person. I like working in person because it enables me to learn more about people. Because one of the downsides of a lot of our digital platforms is that you'll join a meeting and it's not organic. I don't see the pictures of your kids. I don't know if you're running in late because you just played badminton, not that you were late. But I'm like, I lose so much context of who you are as a human. And sure, maybe the work isn't impacted, but I would argue the work is impacted because I've lost you as a human now. And when we talk about culture and healthy workforces, so much of the work is how you engage with your community. And I see how accessible it is for some people to be able to perform by working online. And so it's just a story because I think assessing that balance is really critical for me. But I would never believe in a fully virtual delivery because I would have to build in some kind of like, I don't know, like a virtual meeting where we just have a tea and bring the empathy back. But I still think it would not be as organic as when you do it in real life. I love walking into someone's space because you kind of get to know them. Like I know people who have dimmers in their offices. I know people's kids and I know what sports the kids are in. And like, that is the most important part of the culture for me because it allows me to make decisions like, you know, if somebody has you have 4 kids, Adrian? So if you have 4 kids and I know that about you and you're like, yeah, it's September to April. I'm going to be sick a lot because my kids. I'm going to have empathy. I'm not going to come at like, oh my God, Adrian is slacking so much. I'm going to go, yeah, Adrian has 4 kids. That's a lot. Wow. Managing kids and work life is intense. If I lose that context, my first response isn't as empathetic because I don't understand any of your background. And so, not that I'm necessarily a terrible person, maybe sometimes, but I'm like less inclined to understand you as a person outside of your job. And so just my story is I think I struggle with finding that perfect balance between being together in real life so we can learn about each other and being virtual so we can also do the things we need to do that are more conducive to being virtual.
Thank you. That's awesome. Caroline?
So I think we're seeing this shift with social connection in wellness because yes, we all need to manage our well-being and looking at those pillars of health. So whether it's, again, physical, financial, mental well-being, but we're seeing the shift that social connection is something that can cultivate all of those, maybe some better than others. We've come through a pandemic where, you know, for many of us, we were in remote work. We were doing self sort of wellness in our bedrooms on our yoga mats, to your point, Danielle. In isolation, we have this hyper digital living, and I think what is true wellness is social connection, and social connection can actually help reduce stress. It can help you, give you a sense of purpose. It can help with happiness, self-worth. It motivates you to be part of a community, being socially connected. So whether that's, again, for physical or for mental well-being as an example, being part of initiatives in a social way can actually cultivate and help those, your well-being. We're really seeing sort of these communities emerge. You know, we've got, other than two gentlemen in the room, with a lot of women here, we're seeing, and I know you have something coming up on March the 4th, you're seeing menopause groups, you're seeing motherhood groups, you're seeing groups for people that are going through the same issues that you're going through. That's healthy. Like, creating those communities is about creating social connections. So nurturing communities and talking about things that may be uncomfortable in a way that makes you feel comfortable will help your mental well-being, will help you make connections with somebody that you never knew before is going through the same thing that you're going through, the same challenges, hot flashes, mood swings, whatever it may be, or dealing with work-life balance if you're a new mother. I think that has a real impact, a real positive impact on individuals. From an individual standpoint, you can find ways in which to be social, whether it's not at work, whether it's on your own time, and again, going back to it being something different for everyone, it has to be something that you're comfortable with. So whether it's going to a book reading, whether it's coming to a panel, coming to some sort of public talk. I saw on Bell Let's Talk Day on CTV News, they focused on social connection, and it was a group that walked in the mall. And these aren't senior citizens. These are people like you and I who just, these people live in apartments. They don't have a lot of, they work remotely. They need social connections. And there was this group that went out to Rideau Center and they walked the mall. And they had, discussions while they're walking about whatever was going on in their life. Obviously, sports, clubs, like you, I'm a yogi. I like to be part of that community. And I also volunteer. Volunteering is a great way in which you can give back, you can be social, and participate in something with people that have the same values that you do, whatever that volunteer activity is. So those are some of the individual things, and I think Carleton and other organizations are really cultivating ways in which you can participate and be social. I think that's fantastic. And then, but also as an organization, it's going back, Danielle, to your point of when you have a work environment that you're pretty much on campus, then you still need to create sort of that environment and initiatives. Never mind just wellness, but even how you meet. So how you meet with your colleagues, whether it's team building activities within your organization or within your team, or how you communicate, or how you share wins with your team. Those are all social connection activities. So we have to ensure that organizations are also creating an environment within, sort of their HR leadership, and educating leaders on how to create initiatives that help to nurture social connections within the team, whether you're on campus or whether you're remote.
Okay, so sadly, this is our last question, and maybe Danielle can lead us off. And it's one of those questions, it's multiple questions, so you can choose where you want to focus. I think we'd like to know what your hope is for the upcoming year. If you have any advice for people who are struggling with their wellness, and if there's some little things we could do individually or collectively to take care of ourselves over the next few years.
My notes say don't answer this.
You can say pass. No.
I wanted to make space. My hope for this next year, geez, I don't know. I had so many hopes. I was going to make a joke that wasn't appropriate. That's why it says don't answer this. So we're here now, I guess, recognizing us all as human. Because again, I think so much of our time is spent thinking about work, doing work, talking about work, and all of us have full-blown lives. That is not part of our work. Yeah. And just having a better recognition for that. Again, my big thing is empathy, having empathy for people. Times are tough in the sense that a lot of people are doing a lot of things, and just seeing people and listening for 5 seconds and acknowledging them and holding space for them. And I think in social sciences and nursing and social work and nursing, that's kind of in our training, where you don't have to provide solutions. In fact, one of the best pieces of advice anyone ever gave me was when someone comes to talk to you, like Adrian, a friend calling, the first thing I ask is, do you want me to provide a solution or do you want me to listen? And it directs my energy for the next phase. And so I try to use that, and sometimes, most of the time, people just need someone to listen. And then I'm not in my mind trying to create a solution. I'm more actively in my mind listening, and that's just holding space. And so I hope that, you know, as we continue to reimagine the workforce, we continue to kind of re-identify priorities institutionally through strategic planning, through people who change. We just hold empathy for each other and all the things that we're going through that we can both see and not see for folks. So that's my thing. I guess I did answer it.
Thank you. That's excellent. Caroline.
I think a few things I would say that if you're thinking about what you should focus on, I think the big issue would be prioritizing work-life balance. I think we talked about boundaries. I think that's a critical piece. I think challenging your ability to reach for help. Like, you really need to look to seek support. I think there's still a huge issue with stigma, especially around mental health, where individuals don't necessarily reach out in time, and then they start to struggle, and we see it firsthand. They start to miss days and go off work potentially, and so the opportunity to seek out for help, and again, you have an organization as an employer who has a number of resources, everything from EAP, make sure that you're getting the right care and the right support. I think part of that also is coaching up. And I think it's about advocating for yourself. It's about speaking to your leaders, your coworkers, on what you need to be successful in the workplace. And part of that is about, again, that seeking support. And coaching up can be challenging because you're talking to a leader, you're talking to a coworker that you don't want to feel judged. You don't want to feel embarrassed. Maybe there's some things that you might divulge to them about what your needs are. But I think coaching up is a critical skill set that it takes some time to learn how to do, and just be aware that we offer free public webinars twice a year, and the next one is March the 6th, and guess what? It's on coaching up. So stay tuned on Healthy Workplace. It'll have information on the webinar. It's a free public webinar through Canada Life's Workplace Strategies for Mental Health. So that's, again, gives you some information about how that's important to you. But then from an organizational standpoint, I think the two big things that organizations need to do is, number one, embed wellness into their culture. And that's from senior leadership all the way down to every employee, that if it's part of your culture, that to me is something that can have the greatest impact and can help to move the needle over the next few years. And I am a big proponent of leader training. So we talked about, Danielle, you spoke about, speaking to employees about having conversations about answering emails and so on. Some leaders just aren't comfortable having those conversations, or when you're coaching up, having the conversation about somebody coming to you to say, this is what my needs are. Leader training is a critical part for any organization to ensure that they have the skill set to be able to have those conversations with employees, to let employees feel comfortable coming to them. And from our standpoint, that leader training is foundational. It's really something that can help move the needle and help to, again, create that organizational culture that helps support employees.
Super helpful. Adrian, you get to finish us off.
I do want to remark as well. I didn't realize how gendered the room is.
Hey, kid.
Thanks for coming in.
But I think that speaks to some of the issues that we have, right? Which is there is kind of these gendered roles that we undertake, and it is kind of like a matter of fact where men tend to not seek help or opportunities that could benefit their well-being. So places like this, reaching out to other people, can become a problem. I do want to remark on that because it is stark looking out here. For me, what I hope for is, I'm going to tie it back to what I started off with, which is things have been in flux. There's still a lot of disruption, and we're still kind of feeling unsettled. Unfortunately, I don't have any great news. I feel like this year is still going to have a lot of things that are going to be disruptive, it seems like. One of the things I've been proud of, though, again, is that Carleton has always been an institution where community is important, and that has gotten us through challenging times. The new strategy builds upon that even further, looking at the importance of social connection, which I think is going to be increasingly important over this next year. And so part of my hope is that although we're going to still have challenges, I think over this next year, that we remain true to like what is important at Carleton, which is our community, and that we can together have that community resilience through challenging times.
I have one more wish for the year. It's to get off of Adrian's weak connections list and advance up.
I'll write that down.
I'll be calling you more for some girl chat.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your personal experiences and your humanity. This was really lovely. I learned a lot this afternoon, so thank you.
Going forward. So Sarah, Adrian, Danielle, Caroline, thank you so much for your perspectives today. I think it was just such a beautiful illustration of how complex this conversation can be and how many ways in towards wellness we can have and how much we have available to us right here at Carleton and in the room. So really appreciate that. When Adrian and I were talking about who to invite to the panel and who to engage in conversation, one of the ideas that came up is who embodies wellness at Carleton, and I think that we found a good group here. So thanks everybody, and I want to give you a big hand for that.
Thanks, Adrian.